All right, thank you, everyone. So that was our housekeeping session, and we're going to start the presentation soon. I just want to throw it to Adam. Thank you so much for being with us today, and take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Connor and Trevor. Let me just share my screen. All right, you guys can see that? Awesome. All right.
Good on my side.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, so thank you everybody for coming to my presentation. It's a week in the life of a penetration tester, and I'll be your presenter, Adam Greenhill. Typically, these presentations are kind of like a day in the life of, X, Y, Z job, but I feel like, a penetration tester, like one day out of the week doesn't really do justice to what the job is. So I thought, a week is more of an appropriate time scale for this. So with that in mind, let's get going. So who am I? This slide is a little bit old. I used to be a principal consultant at Security Compass, but I recently moved on to an internal red team position. I'm also one of the OWASP Toronto co-leads, which you'll see a lot in this presentation, as you can see, at the bar at the bottom. I've been penetration testing for over 5 years, and I've got a whole host of different certifications. So the penetration testing, life cycle actually starts before your testing week even begins, and that's the pre-kickoff. And the whole point of the pre-kickoff is to meet with the client and really understand what they want to be tested. If you're an internal penetration tester, you're meeting with the development team. If you're an external penetration tester, like a consultant like myself, you are meeting with your prospective clients. You're trying to really understand not only what they want done, but also their goals to make sure that those two things are adequately aligned. And it really begins with understanding what kind of testing needs to be done. And there is basically limitless different types of tests, because you can have tests that focus on very specific elements of an environment, or you can basically scale it to feasibly an entire organization. But the kind of three main areas that I think most engagements fall into is vulnerability assessments, penetration testing, and red teaming. Vulnerability assessments are, in my opinion, they are pretty much the easiest thing to do over like a massive scale of IP addresses or components that you need to test. However, there's a cost to that, which is vulnerability assessments don't go too deep, because what they are essentially just running automated scans in an environment, against networks, against web applications, and identifying issues. It'll look for like version information. It'll look for like types of software. Maybe it'll do some initial kind of like poking to see if something is vulnerable. It may actually do some exploiting to actually confirm that or not if there's an issue. But for the most part, it just identifies issues. It doesn't really give you any more context than that. And as a result, there is frequent false positives. But like I said, the pro of vulnerability assessments is you can test a lot of things in a short amount of time, or a relatively shorter amount of time. The second type of testing is penetration testing, which is typically a lot smaller scoped than a vulnerability assessment. And a penetration test, it incorporates vulnerability scanning as well, because you want to have that you want to have the ability to catch low-hanging fruit, so you're not manually looking for all of this stuff, because sometimes manual assessments could potentially miss those kind of things. But the real idea about penetration testing is somebody is coming in to manually test for vulnerabilities and attempt to exploit them to see if they can get access to further systems or further into an application. It is a continuous process of identifying things, exploiting them, and then continuing on. Another type of testing is red teaming and adversarial emulation. And I wanted to mention this as well, because it's definitely a lot different than your other two elements. Because red teaming is all about testing an organization's operational and technical controls. As an example, like, a red team, for instance, might, might design a phishing campaign to phish prospective users. And then, if that is successful, test the host-based controls, if they can bypass the EDR, the host-based detection capabilities, and then that once they have access to the host at a fully compromised stage, then they'll go on to perform like network-based testing and determine if there's network-based controls that can detect and stop them. But the idea is that they're looking to determine what controls exist and if they can bypass that, but also the operational controls that house these elements as well. Because as the name suggests, you are emulating like a real, technically intelligent, sophisticated adversary. The ones that you hear about in the news, like the advanced persistent threats and those kind of things. And the idea here is that, when you first start out, you're trying to be as stealthy as possible. But as the engagement goes on and you've accessed the crown jewels, you've compromised them, you've gained access to them, the team may decide to just be as loud as possible to try to get caught, because a part of these types of engagements is determining how the blue team can detect you, if they can detect you, and what their response is. Can they effectively identify where you've breached? Can they remove your malware that you've implanted across their systems? These are the types of things that you are testing with these more red teaming adversarial emulation type assessments. So once that is done, regardless of what kind of testing, the next stage of that is determining what is to be tested, which is still a part of red teaming, even though you might think that you're attacking an entire organization. There could be cases where only like a subsidiary is to be tested, or more importantly, elements of the business might not want to be, tested. Like if there is a mission critical application that if it goes down, a company loses millions of dollars a day, that is something that, requires very specific approvals to be tested, especially from a, like a red team capacity. But the other thing about the pre-kickoff is determining the type of effort required to actually test something. And in my experience, this is a very finicky process, because you really need a Goldilocks kind of like perfect like effort when you look to scope like how long it will take to do an engagement, because I find if you have a small simple application where you are given like weeks to do it, I find that a test will not be done adequately unless it was given maybe 2 or 3 days to do the assessment. And it might sound kind of silly that like more time devoted to an assessment equals like greater results. In my mind, I think it needs to be like very precise, because too many days can kind of cause consultants to be a little bit a little bit complacent, and they might not really devote the attention it needs if you give it 20 days. So the effort, which is basically how long it is to do the assessment, there's several factors that need to come into play, like user rules. What is like the authorization matrix? Is there just an admin, a regular user, and an unauthenticated user? Or are there other roles like maybe managers or read-only accounts, like these kind of things? But also dynamic pages, like how complex is the application itself? And to go the opposite way, things that can help reduce the amount of time it could take to do an assessment. That would be if the application is third-party hosted, because say the company that hired you or your internal company, if they don't own like Salesforce, for instance, or they're not in relations with them, then if it's a Salesforce application, you can't really test that without their approvals. So like these are all things that you think about. But also with this pre-kickoff, this is where you prepare and sign the legal contracts. and you schedule the assessment to see if it or to make sure it can happen. But that is the pre-kickoff, so doing all the legalese and all that. And the first day of the assessment is really when the hacking begins. So the first day you send a start notification, which is just an email that tells all of the need to know parties that an assessment has happened or that it is happening, just for their awareness. But when it comes to a red team, it's important to make sure at least the stakeholders who purchase the red team know that it is ongoing, because it just makes them feel better to know that what they're paying for is actually what they're getting, right? But yeah, I mean, depending on your case as well, you'll only want to send the start notification to certain parties. When it comes to vulnerability assessments or penetration testing, you may want to send this to the blue team as well, just for their awareness, like the SOC team or whatever. But obviously, when it comes to a red team, you don't want to do that. But in any case, other things that happen on the first day of the assessment are checking to make sure your credentials work, that the application is actually accessible, and that it is working. Because you'd be surprised, day one you start your assessment and hey, your credentials don't work, or there's like a WAF blocking all of your connections, so you can't really test it, or the application just straight up doesn't work. Which you talk to any career penetration tester and they'll tell you that they've frequently experienced all of these. Sorry, for some reason my Bluetooth headphones connected to my laptop. So can you guys hear me still?
We lost you for a moment, but you are in fact back.
Okay, I didn't even touch my Bluetooth headphones, but they decided to connect randomly. But okay, yeah, I'm glad that I'm back now.
No worries, we're all used to the Zoom troubles nowadays.
Yeah, I don't even know where they are, but in any case, back to the presentation. So yeah, the other, of course, goal of the first day of the assessment is to kick off the security testing. This is where you're launching your scans or initiate the penetration testing lifecycle, which is like this. So I think there was some kind of different ideas of what this penetration testing lifecycle kind of is, but this is basically the fundamental process that I think most people can agree upon. So first, it starts with reconnaissance. This is where you come into your environment, your network, your web application, and you just try to determine what is there. Does it have upload functionality if it's a web application? If it's a network, are there what ports are open? These are the kind of things that you think about to get an understanding of what you're testing. Two is where you threat model or identify vulnerabilities, which is basically taking the reconnaissance from the first stage and trying to identify what, how can it be used, and therefore how could it be abused. And if you're somebody who's attending this presentation and you are new to penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, this might not be an automatic train of thought for you, but I'll post the resources in a moment to try to give you more of an idea of what to look for. But another thing that I'll mention is that if you are starting out, I encourage you to try to read bug bounty reports. Like Portswigger, the makers of Burp Suite, which is a tool I'll be discussing later in this presentation, they post a yearly kind of roundup of their favorite bug bounties that they found. But aside from that, I think there's other resources that you can just find bug bounty reports, at least really interesting ones. Like if you go to the NetSec Reddit or Twitter, etc. But they'll give you kind of an idea of interesting attacks that might not be so obvious, even if you go through kind of standard web application test cases. I frequently do it as well, just to maintain my knowledge. But anyway, once you've kind of understood that threat model idea of potential vulnerabilities, The next stage is, of course, trying to exploit those things and, see if, the issues that you think could exist do exist. And it's really just that you just basically try and fail, until you find something that is successful. You might have to like play around with payloads or something, but in general, you're just trying to see if you can abuse the thing. And then if you're successful, then there is the post-exploitation phase, which means that you might have gained access to, a host, for example, if you executed remote code execution, or you might have gained access to an admin panel. In any case, you have access to new functionality, which is where the reconnaissance stage comes back in, and basically the cycle just repeats infinitely as you gain more access or you reach your end of your scope. I will say that if you do, if you are doing a penetration test and you do get to that post-exploitation phase, let your client know, let the team that you're working with know, because that new thing that you've gained access to might not be in scope. So with that in mind, that's kind of the penetration testing lifecycle. I see some chats. Is there any questions or any questions in chat or anything?
No questions as of yet. People seem to think that the Bluetooth headset might have been a hacker.
I mean, that would be really interesting, hope not, but what can you do, right?
So we do have first question coming in. So the question is, do the tester always get the credentials, or they need to exploit to gain access? So do the testers always get credentials to start, or do they need to exploit to gain access?
That's a great question. If you're doing a penetration test, honestly, it kind of depends on the engagement. There are times where you might, you'll be given credentials, of course, like if they want you to test, the application from like an insider perspective, like after you've authenticated, like a post authentication test scenarios and all that. But there's certainly times when you're doing like a network test, for instance, and you just find like a web portal or some other kind of management portal, and you don't have credentials. So that's when you would go and like Google the technology, see if there's a default username and password, because in my experience, that is a great starting point and it will likely work. Otherwise, you can just try basic username and passwords like admin, or just like look up like lists of kind of default credentials and just try it. But yeah, in any case, you can find cases where you either get credentials or you don't. So it's a case that will happen either way.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we'll. Oh, sorry, Connor.
Oh, I was just saying thank you. If there's any other questions, I'll give you the heads up from the chat.
Okay, perfect. So let's kind of go into a bit of an interactive stage here. So let's like step away from like technology, for instance. Let's try to look at this from like kind of like a practical scenario, like the penetration life cycle. So let's pretend that you're a thief, and like what do you see here? I don't know how zoomed in this is, so I'll just make it bigger. So let's kind of walk through the reconnaissance and threat model stage of this. Like what are some potential like attacks that you could do against the house? I'll give you guys a minute to kind of go through that. All right, open windows, open doors, backyard door, scan for Wi-Fi. Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. So you guys doing great here. So yeah, like, I mean, if I were like a thief looking at this house, I might say like, oh, maybe is the front door unlocked? Maybe there's a key under the like the floor mat that you can see there. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any like cameras or any kind of anything there. It looks like you could potentially climb and get onto the roof and maybe try those windows. Yeah, look for cameras, alarms. The other thing, which I kind of looked at this photo a little bit before I put it on this presentation, but the neighbor has a back gate, or sorry, like a fence in their backyard. This house doesn't seem to have that, so you can very easily sneak into the backyard, try the doors, try the windows. If they have like a storm cellar, maybe you can access that. This could be a house, could also be a shed. Maybe there's avenues there. But like basically the exercise that we're doing here for this house, if you're doing penetration testing, just consider that when you're looking at a web application or a network, or really anything. If you have an embedded device, which unfortunately I don't have one like within arm's reach here, but just try to do that kind of exercise where you look at it, think about what somebody could do maliciously to this thing, and then try it out. So the subsequent days here, this is where you basically just continue and execute the security testing. Now, before I get into it, I just really want to hammer this reconnaissance point home, because I assume that there will be some parties in this, in the audience of this presentation who are going to take your OSCP or other kind of offensive security like practical exams in this industry. And like I've been kind of in the community for a while now, and I think the number one reason why people fail is because their reconnaissance they're just not looking for the things well enough to be able to identify the issues to later exploit. Because if you can't find it, how can you exploit it, right? And to really hammer this home, there's this amazing quote from Rob Joyce, who is a chief from the Tailored Access Unit. And this is the team that developed the exploits that that were leaked a few years ago, like Eternal Blue, etc. Like these guys definitely know what they're doing. But there is a presentation which I encourage you all to watch. It's called the NSA Tau Chief on Disrupting Nation-State Hackers. And in it, he says, if you want to protect your network, you really have to know your network. Why are we, the NSA, successful? We put in the time to know that network. We put in the time to know it better than the people who designed it and the people who secured it. And like, if you're going to go into like hack a web application, like you basically have to develop this mindset of understanding the thing that you're attacking extremely well. And once you do that, that's when you can start to identify gaps in security, which you can exploit to, achieve your means. So yeah, like just to sum it up, here's some like questions to think about when you're doing this to try to give you an idea. If you're looking at a functionality, what does this functionality do? Does it do it securely? Are there any assumptions that developers made about how the application would be used? And are there ways of manipulating the application that the developers didn't think about? Lastly, this is a bit of a nuanced question, but I want you guys to think about it as well. And that is, do functionalities interact with each other securely? Because you might have component A, which does things securely, it does input validation, etc. And then component B, which does the same thing, but because of some assumption made between those two components, there is an issue. Like as like just a quick example, like maybe you have like a form that accepts like a first name, last name, and then you have like a database. Now the form validates things, securely, it prevents cross-site scripting and all that. But maybe it allows like Irish last names where you have like a, like O'Brien or something like that, where you have a single quote in the last name. Now you send that on to the database, and that single quote just mangles your query and causes an issue. So that's what I kind of want you to think about. Again, maybe that wasn't the best example, but just something to kind of think about when you're doing testing. Are there any questions before I talk about like the kind of I guess the actual like penetration testing?
So I think before we go on, we have 2 questions popping up. Oh, can you hear me okay? Adam, can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so we have two questions popping up. I've got one question. Um, how do you deal with a manager who might take offense to, you tested our network internally, you're not hacking like a real hacker, this network is internal and not exposed anywhere. How might you handle that objection?
Well, I mean, like it's pretty, I wouldn't say trivial, but an attacker can get inside of a network. Like they might be able to just walk into an office and plug a laptop in and gain access to the network. They might have to fish to get into that, or abuse some kind of external facing portal to get into that network. But the idea is that security should not just be a perimeter objective. There should be defense in depth so that everything from the outside, even inside, is secure. Because you don't want to have like super, like if you have a castle, right, and you have 100-foot walls, like nobody can go through the walls, right, because they're you put all your money into defending the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens if you have a Trojan horse situation? There's attackers get into that wall. You want to make sure that if they do breach that wall, there's other defenses there. So you just want to have a full defense in depth to ensure that regardless of how a hacker gets in, if they get in, that things are secured.
It sounds like you're taking it back to your point about, is there an assumption about how things communicate to each other? Maybe there's an external app that communicates to an internal app, and there's an assumption that internal is safe.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah.
We've got a couple other questions. Do you mind if we shout them out before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. I've got one. How do you separate a testing for application flaws versus infrastructure versus process?
Sorry, what? Could you repeat that question?
Absolutely. So the question is, how do you separate testing for application flaws versus infrastructure versus process? So I guess it's application flaws versus infrastructure flaws versus process flaws.
Yeah, certainly. So this is really it really comes down to excuse me, like this is all what is discussed in the pre-kickoff. So as long as it is within the scope of the assessment, and it is you have adequate time to test it, you should be able to perform web application testing with burp, or like infrastructure testing with Nmap and then subsequent tools. So the differences is really what is to be tested, because that will identify whether it's an application vulnerability or an infrastructure vulnerability or a process issue. So that's kind of it. But that is all like kind of ironed out in the early days of the assessment. So both you, the tester, and the client knows what type of vulnerabilities are to be expected. Because if you're hired for a web application assessment and you're only giving them infrastructure findings, that's typically a problem. So you want to iron that out before you get into the meat and potatoes of the engagement. Is there any other questions?
We've got some more, but I don't want to hold you up too much.
All right.
I'll try and wait for another pause and fire them off. Then why don't we get back into the flow, and I'll keep a list of them.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so I see we're about halfway into this presentation. I might have to kind of skip through all of this, but in any case, the tools of the trade for web application penetration testing are several things. I'll have to stop sharing my screen for a moment here, and just to try to share with you the my browser. All right, yeah. So the tools of the trade here are the OWASP security testing guide and some kind of intercepting proxies. So what I mean by the OWASP security testing guide is, if you browse to the URL of that I posted here, when you go in to execute some kind of assessment, you need a methodology of things that you're going to review and test. And I am from OWASP here, but I really don't think that there's another like free guide that is as comprehensive as this. So if you go to this, it's completely free. You don't have to be a member or anything to browse to it or review it. It's all free. It's actually on GitHub as well. But you browse to this, and as you can see, just from like the table of contents, it is a very comprehensive testing guide. It covers everything from session management to authentication, authorization, all of that. Like, you know, like if we jump into like reflected cross-site scripting as an example, that you can just see from the like the size of the scroll bar that, you know, that it's like it just keeps going. Like there's examples, there's you know, descriptions of what these issues are, what to look for, what to like, if you find that you're getting blocked by something, maybe there's ways to bypass it. It's all here. The other important thing here is, let me see if I can find that remediation. Okay, for some reason there is no remediation. Wait, maybe that's it. Yeah, okay, so it does kind of talk about remediation here. Typically there's like an actual section where it discusses how to fix the issues that are found. But yeah, like how you like not only find these issues, but fix them is all in this guide. So if you're starting out with penetration testing, definitely a great resource for that. But also, like once you kind of have these test cases let down or like noted down, that's really kind of where you get the like the threat model or like, you know, potential vulnerabilities from, is just, hey, if there's like a login form and there's like authenticated sessions, now you can do like authorization testing, you can do authentication testing, session management testing, all of that. So yeah, it's a lot to think about, but that's why a lot of people in this industry have like a checklist to kind of go through just to make sure that they're consistently testing things. But from a tooling perspective, it's really, you know, kind of two main areas, which is one, an intercepting proxy, and, you know, some other like tooling. And I wrote like a script, so you can actually see like the types of commands that, you know, would be executed in a typical like web application assessment from me. I posted that up here, and let me see if I can move this bar. Yeah, I've written that out here, but I'll get back to it in a moment. But in any case, an intercepting proxy is a tool that sits between your browser and the web application that you are testing. And the point is that when you have a browser, there could be some kind of client-side input validation that prevents you from, you know, really, you know, like understanding or really being able to control what kind of data you send to the server. And, you know, because of that, you might not be able to fully, you know, test the actual like web application because of that. It just gives you a greater control over how you interact with the web server, which allows you to test it more intimately and, you know, identify vulnerabilities faster and easier than just using like the forms, for instance. You know, but yeah, I'll demo that in a moment. But yeah, I'll just talk about the other tools that may come across when you're doing web application testing, which is one, like directory brute forcing, which, you know, if you know, you have a web application that doesn't have like a link to an admin page, but, you know, there is an admin page there, directory brute forcing is how you can find that, because it basically just, you know, hits your web application with a lot of different potential URLs, like, you know, website.com/admin or /admin.php, you know, etc. So it just automates that process of trying to find interesting files which may not be directly referenced from the application that you're, you know, testing. But other test cases to look at would be like SSL, TLS testing. If it's in scope, which you'll definitely want to check to make sure it is, but you know, performing that kind of infrastructure pen testing against your web application, seeing if there's any other services running, you know, both TCP and UDP. But also, if you're testing a like known product like WordPress or Joomla, there's typically a dedicated tool to also try to find like, you know, platform specific vulnerabilities. This isn't comprehensive by any means, but they're just two examples, like WP Scan and Joom Scan, you know, both great. I don't think I'll have like too much time to really go into this, but there's also a practical vulnerable, purposely vulnerable website that you can go to and play around with, and you can browse to that. It's another OWASP project here. So you can browse to it with this URL, and it has like a live demo as well. Like I said, I thought I'd have more time to go into this specifically. Okay, well, I'm kind of glad they're running out of time because it looks like the application's actually down right now anyway. But it's like that's kind of good luck. But like last night when I was looking at it, like it was working fine. I'm sure it'll be working again either in an hour or two or maybe tomorrow. But there is a demo here. Maybe I can kind of browse through it through this site. Oh man, this is brutal. So yeah, I don't know if you can really see this. Let me try to zoom in. But the OWASP Juice Shop is basically like an e-commerce website that has been, like I said, purposely designed to be insecure. So all of the issues that I discussed in the OWASP testing guide, like authentication issues, authorization issues, like cross-site scripting, all of the things that are mentioned here, or maybe not all of them, but a good number of them can be exploited in this platform. And yeah, it's down. So this is, I've had a lot of bad demos in my lifetime, but this is yeah, this is probably the worst. So all right, we'll just keep going. Now I'll mention as well that if you're brand new to information security and you find that the challenges are a little bit intimidating, they also have tutorials that will walk you through the types of things that you need to do to identify and exploit the issues on the web application. So it is definitely a great starting point to do that, or to learn how to do penetration testing. And last but not least, I mentioned that I had a script that I prepared. So that's here. Like I said, I've linked it in the presentation slides, so you'll be able to download this. But when it comes to a web application or a server that I'm attacking, these are pretty much ubiquitous commands that I will run every time. We have a full Nmap scan of all the ports. It does vulnerability, it looks for vulnerabilities. It does kind of other reconnaissance stuff. I have an Nmap scan here that does basically the UDP side of things. I do directory busting, directory busting. So like I mentioned, just brute forcing URLs of our target web application. And then I do some other scanning as well, but I've given that to you guys so you can play around with that in your own environments. Like I said, I don't have my application is down, so I can't really demo it for you, but yeah, there's that. In any case, I've also just mentioned a bunch of test cases, which for some reason I thought I had time to do all these things, but clearly we don't. But yeah, it's all covered in the OWASP testing guide anyway. But I'll just kind of jump to the final day here because yeah, like I said, we're running out of time anyway. So once the assessment is done, once you've attacked the network or the web application that you're targeting, and once you've basically gone through the OWASP web application testing guide, or you've gone through all of the network ports that you've identified, then the last day is when you basically finalize testing. You finish up anything that you any last minute test cases that you may have. One thing that I will mention is that typically your most advanced or complicated attacks will happen on your last day or second last day of testing. It's just because that is when your understanding of this application is at its highest, and therefore you really get a sense of what will work and what won't, as well as maybe that last sleep that you've thought about ideas in the night or something, but So don't be surprised if you find like that you have like an inspirational idea at like, like 2 or 3 p.m. on your final day. It just happens. It's kind of a part of the job. But in any case, when you wrap up the engagement, that's when you start the reporting. And this will differ like client to client, but typically there is a like executive summary and then a list of findings where you have a description, some kind of severity rating, which is either CVSS or other kind of risk matrix. I've put one here where you basically compare impact and likelihood. Yeah, then you kind of just, detail out what the risk is of the issue and then talk about how the person receiving this report, how they can fix it. So that's basically it. I'll just also present kind of the last few slides here. So in conclusion, penetration testing boils down to really understanding what it is you're targeting and determining the strengths and the weaknesses of that thing, and then exploiting the weaknesses that you found, and then this cycle repeats. I have also included another helpful slide because I know that there's going to be a lot of new people doing penetration testing or new people who are completely new to penetration testing in the audience of this presentation. So I've included links that you can use to get your hands dirty with these subjects. I've also included, if you're starting from scratch, I highly recommend you take like development courses, like really understand how like people build web applications. Like learn a programming language. Like no matter what you learn, whether it's Java, C#, Python, etc., it will come in handy. And once you've done those things, also do some basic networking courses, like know what the difference between TCP and UDP are, what the network stack is, how things communicate to each other. And then once you're at like a comfortable position with those things, that's when you jump into doing web application testing. You can go through the OWASP testing guide. The Portswigger Academy is also an amazing reference. It's entirely free, it's hands-on, and it walks you through like, I'll just kind of show you guys what that is here. Like the Portswigger Academy, it's also free, like I said. Let me just see. I guess this is probably the best way to show you. So here's just like a list of labs. And it's like there's countless different topics here, from SQL injection to XSS to directory traversal and like server-side template injection. So if you go to any of these topics, you can find that there is like detailed solutions. There's potentially videos that discuss these things. There's also like a write-up. I don't know if I can browse to that. Oh yeah, okay, there you go. So for all of these subjects, they also have like extremely detailed like descriptions of what the issues are, how they're exploited, typical kind of use cases. Like it's a very detailed, comprehensive like manual on how to do web application penetration testing. If you've started doing any kind of reading in this industry, you've probably found the Web Application Hackers Handbook. So the person that wrote that is the person behind this. So this is the most up-to-date version of that book. And like I said, it's entirely free. You just browse to the Portswigger like Academy and download Burp Suite and go wild. Other things to mention are if you're doing network penetration testing, do VulnHub, which allows you to just download vulnerable machines that you can host like locally on your machine with like VirtualBox or VMware. If you don't want to host it locally, you can also use Hack the Box, which has a bit of a frustrating sign-up process, especially if you're new. But once you do that, you'll gain access to labs that you can play around with. And last but not least, definitely come and join local communities. I have like links to several in the Toronto area. If you're visiting this presentation from outside of Toronto, there's definitely local security chapters as well for you. But the ones here are, OWASP Toronto, which, come hang out with us. We have a presentation next week, which is very exciting. So come check that out. There's also Task and DEFCON 416. I know the guys that run all of these different communities, and they're all great. They're very informative, and yeah, that's about it. Here's my contact details. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, send me an email. I'm very approachable. If you have questions about starting out, or if you're doing something and you have you're trying to debug why something isn't working, definitely reach out to me. I'm definitely very approachable, very friendly. So do that, and yeah, we'll be in contact. Are there any questions or comments?
Well, first I'm going to plus one Adam being a great contact and very approachable. So I'm going to back up that claim. First, before we get into the questions, Adam, thank you so much for your time presenting today. Yeah, I've never seen the juice shop go down before. That was an unexpected one, eh?
Of course, right?
Oh, curse of presentations. So we're going to take some questions now. We've got a few lined up. The one that I want to answer right off the bat is someone was asking, are these slides going to be available after this presentation? I believe the answer to that is yes. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. I'll definitely be able to share them. I'll post them on the OWASP Toronto website. I can show you guys where that is in a moment.
Awesome. So for any of you who were wanting to go into more detail, because Adam, I think you packed a bunch of great information in there. So if you're looking for that, Adam's saying he's going to upload it to the OWASP Toronto website, and we'll be able to share that there. I'm going to be sending the video over to OWASP as well after this presentation, so the video will be accompanying that.
Yeah, exactly. So if you go to owasp.org/www-chapter-Toronto, it will be in the downloads page here with the link to the video as well as the slides. But if you also follow us on YouTube, you'll definitely get a notification when we upload it. And yeah.
Awesome. So I'll start rifling through the questions now, Adam. I'll be respectful of the time too, but do you have a minute or two if we want to go through these?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so I've got a few here in the Q&A section I'm going to start with. So the first question is, how do you align to the question, it's not externally exposed, it's safe because it's a firewall? How do you handle this sort of pushback? There's a comment from the question asker as well going, seriously, I just heard this question 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really have any context of what the thing is behind the firewall, but a firewall could potentially be bypassed, or that application can be accessed externally. Even if there's a firewall, somebody is still accessing it, right? Whether it's a web interface or some kind of networking protocol, there is somebody accessing it externally, right? And it just takes that service or that thing to be compromised, or even that user to be compromised for whatever this object is, or this application, service, whatever, to be attacked and potentially compromise itself. So a firewall is part of the solution, but is not a holistic solution.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another one. This time about the DAS SAS scanning. So we've got, do you like to shorten the time reviewing by reviewing, do you shorten your time by reviewing previous DAS SAS scans, limiting your discovery recon time? How useful is this information to you?
Yeah, so when it comes to DAST and SAST, like DAST is basically like kind of doing like automated scanning against a web application looking for vulnerabilities like like SQL injection, XSS. SAST, for those that don't know, is like looking through the source code of, say, an application, for example. And these are definitely helpful tools. They point us in the right direction, but they're definitely not a full comprehensive look. Like the DAST equivalent of like the manual review is a penetration test, whereas the SAST equivalent would be a like manual code review. And in both cases, you're getting a much more comprehensive, like fine-grained look at the thing that you are testing. So they're helpful, but in either case, if I had an important banking application, I would not just leverage DAST and SAST. I would want to make sure that there is both penetration testing, and then even before we get there, that a substantial like security oriented code review is performed.
Awesome. Okay, some more questions coming in as we go, so we're just going to keep firing off here. So we've got a good one here. It seems like a good time for an actual adversary to try and attack, or an actual attack, would be during a pen test. Do you have any stories of this type of thing happening, or protection mechanisms that you yourself take to ensure that the pen test isn't an open attack vector?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess like a couple of things, like I encourage anybody who hasn't done it to like just spin up like a DigitalOcean like web server, and like just look through the logs, like just create like a basic like web server with like a login page, and just like watch the logs, because things are constantly being attacked, constantly being scanned across the internet. Like everybody just getting constantly attacked. So that's kind of one thing. And where I'm kind of going with that is the fact that like these web servers are just constantly being bombarded with payloads and malicious things. So they're prepared for that, and they're able to handle that. But in terms of like aligning a penetration test with like a coordinated attack, I haven't really seen that, just because like when we send that start notification that I mentioned at the start of my presentation, that is very specific of, like, it has very specific details of who we are, what IP addresses that we're coming from, and like the users that we're using. So if there was an attack that was from some other IP address, then the teams would know that it's not us. And there's been times when I've been doing assessments where the team will just like, I'll literally get like a call, like they won't even email me, they'll just call me on my phone and say like, hey, are you coming from IP address XYZ, because we've detected malicious activity? And we go like, nope, like we're like, we check with our team to make sure that like a VPN didn't die or something. But we double check that, and nope, that's not an IP address from us. And then they go investigate it, triage it, and handle it. So that is how we deal with that.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess part of the story there is anything on the internet is going to get scanned and attacked pretty quickly. So the simultaneity of a pen test and an attack are likely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a question from an audience member here. How does someone give a talk for OWASP Toronto, or are speakers always fixed?
Yeah, actually, this is a great, thank you for the question, by the way, because it's a great kind of chance for me to kind of just pitch OWASP Toronto. But yeah, we always welcome new presenters. Like, don't feel like you have to be like somebody like important in the industry or anything. Like, if you just have like an interesting like OWASP related topic that you want to present, we are super open to like having you present. So yeah, like if you're interested in presenting at OWASP Toronto, reach out to me. I will introduce you to our coordinator, Mr. Jack Enders, and he will slot you in. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely reach out. We would love to have new people at our conference.
Awesome. Yeah, the whole OWASP team is fantastic. I've had the opportunity to speak with you guys on several occasions and just can't say enough nice things.
Yeah, we've actually had Connor present, so go check that out. That was a year or so ago, right?
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Pandemic time seems odd now, right? Everything seems both very far away and very close. So we are at time. We've got one or two more questions for you, Adam. Are you okay to stick on for just a moment?
Yeah, I'm good for another, 5 minutes or so.
Sure, no worries. So the last question we've got here, so one is a comment, a suspicion that the OWASP 20th last Friday might have increased the number of people accessing Juice Shop. So that seems like a plausible explanation.
Look at that. Presentation is done and the it's back up again.
There it is. Of course.
Everybody.
And so the last question I've got for you before we wrap up here is, what do you think is the best way to get developers actively involved in the security process? Help them be more security minded?
Absolutely. Yeah, so for one thing, I think it's great when developers show an interest in doing security minded things. I definitely don't like the idea of developers being siloed away from the process. So for one thing, I think what would be really beneficial for developers is to basically go through sorry, let me find it here. There is actually like a resource on OWASP that will just walk you through like how to develop software securely. So I will let me find that. That's the yeah. So here's like a starting point. So yeah, like OWASP has plenty of resources on how to develop software securely. So I would definitely start there. Also, just be a part of the community. Actively try to learn what these different attacks are. You don't have to go so far as to actually learn how to exploit them. It would help certainly if you want to do it. Definitely do it. I don't think it's I definitely think it would be beneficial to do it, but at least if you just understand like what an attack is and how it's performed, that should be sufficient to allow you to develop software securely as well. Like if you're coding in a specific language, like what is it, like Ruby or Python or Java or something, definitely like kind of tap into resources that talk about how to write like those languages securely. I keep looking over here because I have a book on the resource, but I don't know if I can readily find that. Anyway, it's called the art of the like secure software assessment or something like that. Anyway, you can buy that book and it'll walk you through like how to just write secure code, period. So that's another resource for you.
Awesome. So I'm going to cut the questions there. Thank you so much for your time today. I know we all really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and learning a little bit more about what a week in the life of a penetration tester looks like. For my part, again, I've been Connor McKinnon from Wealthsimple. Just going to do a small plug here. If you are interested in Wealthsimple at all, feel free to reach out to myself on that. Always happy to connect with other security professionals. With that being said, I think we'll stop the recording. And thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Adam, for presenting. And everyone just have a wonderful Wednesday.
Yeah, thanks, Connor, for having me. And thank you everybody for attending. It's been great.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Take care.